The clock read 6 in the morning when Dona Alzira opened the living room windows. The morning breeze slipped into the room with softness, bringing the scent of the backyard and the lazy song of a thrush. A steaming cup of tea sat on the old wooden table, next to a blank envelope and a blue pen. It was the 4th time that week she had tried to write something, but the words always slipped away. Still, there was a strange and quiet urge inside her that made her try again. The house was filled with absences. The old radio played a soft bolero, like it did every morning since Carlos had gone. The hanging paintings, the crooked picture frames, and the pillow beside her on the couch were all still there, unchanged, as if waiting for someone who would never return. Alzira had lived alone since the funeral, alone in body, in soul, in sound. But even wrapped in that silence, something inside her still needed to speak. With slow hands, she scribbled a phrase on the paper she hadn't seen in a long time. "We meet in the breeze." That was what Carlos always said when he left for work, even after retirement, as if love needed poetic farewells. Alzira gave a sad smile. She ended the note with a period, without thinking of a recipient, folded the paper, taped it, and stuck it to the glass of the window facing the street. She didn't know exactly why she did that. Maybe it was a way to talk to God, maybe to the wind, or maybe she just wanted to feel that her voice could still cross some boundary, even if no one answered. It felt more real than talking to the walls. She stood there for a few minutes, watching the note, before going back inside and closing the lace curtain. By late afternoon, she went out to water the plants. Her eyes passed over the window, not expecting anything, and she was surprised. The note was gone. Only the taped corner remained. She looked around, at the empty sidewalk, at the half-open gate. Maybe the wind took it. Maybe a curious neighbor removed it. Maybe a dog. Still, a chill ran up her spine. It felt like someone had heard. That night, the longing felt less sharp. She had bread with butter and a chamomile tea while listening to a collection of old love songs. There was no celebration, no full relief, but there was a truce. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual, made coffee, took a new sheet of paper, and wrote. Sometimes what we write to ourselves reaches someone else. She placed the new note on the same window. That morning's breeze felt more alive, as if it were paying attention. She sat in her rocking chair and remained there, motionless, her eyes fixed outside. Dona Alzira wasn't expecting an answer, but something inside her had begun to move, like an inner door cracked open after being locked for too long. At the end of the day, the note was still there, but something new had appeared taped alongside it. A small piece of paper, carefully folded, with a simple drawing. 2 hands held together. There was no name, no words, only the light, childlike stroke of someone who meant to say, "I understood." Alzira brought the paper to her chest, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. For some reason, that gesture moved her more than she had imagined, as if suddenly she wasn't the only one trying to cross the emptiness with words. There was someone, she didn't know who, but there was someone, and that alone was enough to reignite a light that had long been dimmed inside her. The next note came without hesitation. "If you're still out there, just know you kept me company today." When night came, Alzira turned the porch lights on again, like she used to in the days she waited for visitors. She didn't know if anyone would come by, but deep down, she hoped so. The window remained open, and the world outside felt less distant. For the first time in a long time, she fell asleep with the feeling that maybe life wasn't done speaking to her just yet. On the 3rd day, before the sun had fully risen, Dona Alzira woke up with a restless heart. There was something different in the air, as if time had shifted without making a sound. She made coffee, set the table with 2 cups out of instinct, and then walked to the window. The latest note was still there, but next to it, carefully folded, was another piece of paper, this time with a single word: "Thank you." The handwriting was shaky, probably from a child, but the impact was direct. That one small word felt like an unexpected hug. Alzira sat in her armchair, holding the note like someone holding a precious secret. The silence in the house now had a different texture. It was no longer a silence of abandonment, but of anticipation. And that made all the difference. She decided to reply, took a fresh sheet of paper and wrote, "Sometimes we don't know who's listening, but we still choose to keep speaking." She folded it with care and taped it to the window. For the first time in months, she brushed her hair with attention and put on a light lipstick. It was like she was starting to see herself again, as if the mirror whispered, "You're still here." Throughout the morning, she quietly watched the street. She saw a mailman, 2 older men chatting, a young woman with grocery bags, and then, there she was. A skinny little girl with a backpack who paused for a second in front of the window. Alzira pretended not to notice, but her heart raced. The girl looked around, took the note, and ran off as if she were carrying a forbidden treasure. Dona Alzira didn't follow her. She just smiled. Now she knew who it was, or almost. She felt the urge to open the door and call out, but chose not to break the magic. There was something beautiful about that delicate anonymity. Writing to someone who remained hidden was like planting a seed in unknown soil. You never knew what would grow, but you still planted it. The next day the girl came by again, this time leaving a drawing of a flower. Alzira stuck it on the fridge, as if it had come from a granddaughter. It was strange how someone could fill such an old emptiness without even saying their name. She started thinking about the girl all the time. How old might she be? Where did she live? Why was she reading the notes? And most of all, why did she keep coming back? The following days became a silent exchange. A dried flower, a sticker shaped like a star, a heart drawn in marker. Dona Alzira responded with short phrases, small doses of tenderness taped to the window. In each gesture, an invisible pact. I'm here, and so are you. The house, once just a shelter for memories, was beginning to feel full again. The furniture seemed more alive. Time felt lighter. Alzira woke up with a sense of purpose. It was no longer just tea and medicine. Now there were notes to write, words to reflect on, feelings to tend. She still didn't know who the girl was, but she felt that somehow the 2 of them were meeting in the middle of their pain. 2 lonely hearts that recognized each other in the reflection of a window. And maybe that was more than enough. It was the beginning of something that neither grief, nor time, nor silence had been able to stop from blooming. As the days passed, Dona Alzira began watching the window more attentively, trying to understand who the girl behind the drawings was. Always around the same time, at about 7:20 in the morning, she would appear with a backpack on her shoulders, her hair tied in a ponytail, and her eyes low as if she didn't want to be seen. She never looked directly at Alzira, only at the window. It was as if that lacy glass pane were a portal between 2 lives that never touched, but could still sense each other. Alzira felt something warming inside her chest, something between curiosity and tenderness. She had never seen the girl with any adults around. She seemed to walk alone, her steps light, but carrying an invisible weight. A quiet child, the kind that moves through the edges of the world without making a sound. In the 3rd week of exchanges, the girl left a sealed envelope, different from the usual scraps of paper. Inside, there was a small note written with shaky letters. "My name is Bia," and below, almost faded, as if it were a whispered secret, "Thank you for seeing me." Alzira read those words with tears in her eyes. This wasn't just a child's game anymore. It was a real bridge between two hurts. From that day on, she started signing the notes with her name, Alzira. It was the first time she had written her own name on anything since Carlos had passed. In a way, she also felt seen. For the first time in a long while, someone might call her something other than that old lady. It was like getting her identity back, even if just through short sentences and colorful pens. Alzira began writing more carefully, choosing her words the way one chooses flowers. Her notes spoke of courage, of longing, of good days and hard ones. Sometimes she quoted poetry. Other times she simply wrote, "How are you today?" And even if Bia didn't always respond with words, she left signs, a rosebud, a paper star, a piece of candy left on the windowsill. She started imagining the girl's home. What were her parents like? Did they know what she was doing? Did they care for her with kindness? Sometimes Alzira would see Bia coming back from school with quicker steps, red eyes, and a trembling chin. On those evenings, she wrote longer notes, even knowing the girl would only pass by the next morning. It was her way of giving a hug without touching. One afternoon, Dona Alzira saw a man yelling loudly out on the sidewalk. Through the window, she saw the girl curled up, clutching her notebooks to her chest, while a woman dragged shopping bags nearby. It was a quick scene, but enough to set off an alarm inside the elderly woman. The pieces were starting to fit. Bia was invisible at home. The notes weren't just a pastime, they were a lifeline. It reminded her of her younger self, of the days when Carlos was the only one who truly heard her soul. Maybe that's why losing him had hurt so much. It wasn't just about missing him. It was the loss of her safe place. Now, writing to Bia was like opening a new door, letting affection return, even if only through tiny cracks. The girl didn't know it, but she was saving Alzira too. That night, she decided to tape 2 notes to the window, one with words and one with a peppermint candy, Carlos's favorite. To sweeten the day, she wrote. It was the first time she had used humor since her grief began, and also the first time she felt something light again. By the end of the day, both the note and the candy were gone. In their place, a heart drawn in blue marker and the word sweet. Dona Alzira saved that note like a photograph, folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer of her writing desk, and smiled. The girl now had a name, their bond now had a story, and the window, once just an opening for air, had become an opening for life. Their routine remained steady. Like a quiet ritual, every morning Dona Alzira carefully prepared her note, folded it, taped it, and placed it on the window before Bia walked by. She already knew her steps, the way she glanced around, the delicate way she pulled the note as if it were a secret. It gave meaning to her days, and Alzira, even if she didn't say it out loud, waited for her. The notes were no longer just short replies. Bia began writing a little more. One said, "Today I cried at school." Another simply read, "I miss someone, but I don't know who." Alzira read them with teary eyes. She never asked questions. She only responded with words of comfort, as if she were speaking to the girl she once had been. Over time, the papers turned into full conversations. One day, the girl left a wildflower tied with string. On the note, she wrote, "You remind me of the good teachers." It was the greatest compliment Alzira had received since becoming a widow. She replied with a poem by Cecilia Mireles and a message. Those who plant words with love will one day harvest hope. The girl answered with a drawing of a tree, its leaves shaped like hearts. Dona Alzira's house began to change without her even noticing. The curtain, once always closed, now stayed open during the day. The picture frames returned to their place on the living room cabinet. The radio played louder, and the scent of fresh cake started to fill the house again. It was as if Bia's presence, even from a distance, had reawakened her will to live. Even the backyard plants looked greener. One afternoon, Nide called. Her daughter, always busy, noticed something lighter in her mother's voice. Alzira said she was writing to a friend and changed the subject. She didn't want to explain too much. She was afraid that by sharing, someone might ruin what was blooming there. It was like protecting a budding flower. A single harsh wind could make everything fall apart. Bia also seemed more confident. She began signing her notes with drawings of herself. Big eyes, striped t-shirts, a shy smile. Dona Alzira started drawing too, even without much skill. Crooked flowers, a smiling sun, a steaming mug of tea. Their exchange became affection shaped in paper. There were no expectations, just presence. And that was enough. One day, it rained heavily, and Bia didn't show up. Alzira felt restless, like something was physically missing. The next day, she left 2 notes, one with a short story and another with a tiny paper umbrella. Bia replied, "I was afraid of the rain, but I missed you." The connection was clear, and the window had become more than an object. It was now a bridge between 2 healing souls. Alzira started sitting closer to the glass. Sometimes she wouldn't even write. She would just watch. She didn't want to intrude on the mystery of the girl, but she wanted to be there. She knew that for some people, consistency means more than 1,000 words. And being there, every single day, was her way of saying, "I'm not going anywhere." Over time, people on the street began to notice the window full of colorful papers. Some children stopped to look. A neighbor once said, "That lady on the corner talks to the wind now." Alzira simply smiled. They had no idea that the wind now carried life. She was no longer just a lonely old lady. She was Alzira, and she was open again, to doors and to windows. Nade showed up without warning, as she often did. She came through the front door with the old key and a grocery bag in her hands. Dona Alzira was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pumpkin jam. Her daughter looked around and immediately frowned when she noticed the colorful notes on the living room window. She walked over slowly, picked one up, and read it silently, unable to hide her look of surprise. "What is this, Mom?" she asked, holding the note like it was something suspicious. Alzira didn't answer right away. She dried her hands on a dish towel, walked over, and gently took the paper from her daughter's hands. "Just words," she said. "For who?" "A girl who walks by." "Do you know her?" "No, but she knows me." Nade didn't hide her unease. She said her mother was imagining things, that it could be dangerous. What if it's a prank? What if someone's taking advantage of your loneliness? Alzira listened in silence, looking out the window. It wasn't the first time her daughter had treated her feelings like weaknesses, but for the first time, she didn't stay quiet. "I might be alone, Nade, but I'm not empty anymore." While cleaning out the drawers of her dresser, Dona Alzira found a box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were pieces of lace, old magazine clippings, and a small yellowed letter written in Carlos's familiar handwriting. It was a farewell letter he had written years ago, but never had the courage to give her. Alzira felt her chest tighten as she read the first lines. "If I go before you, I want you to know that I loved you in every silence, in every impatience, in every act of forgiveness." She read it 3 times, as if every sentence needed to be absorbed slowly. Carlos had always been economical with words, but deep in his gestures. That letter felt as if it had been written for that very moment, as if he already knew about the window, the notes, the little girl. That afternoon, Alzira wrote her longest note yet. Today I found a letter from your Carlos. He told me things I needed to hear. Sometimes words arrive late, but they still find a home. She folded the paper carefully, taped it to the window, and stood watching from behind the curtain. When Bia passed by, she read the note and looked directly into the house. For the first time, their eyes met. Bia's gaze was timid, but intense. Alzira smiled. The girl replied with a drawing, a couple holding hands in front of an open window. There were no words, but the message was clear. It made Alzira feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: wholeness. For the first time since her grief began, she felt sure she still belonged to something bigger than her silence. At the end of the day, she picked up Carlos's letter and read it aloud, as if he were there. Sitting in her armchair, feet wrapped in a blanket, she read every word with reverence and gratitude. Then she folded the letter and placed it inside a new envelope. On the back she wrote, "This is not a farewell, it's a new beginning." The next day, Bia left a gift, a paper flower with the phrase, "You taught me to love letters." Alzira felt her eyes fill again. The girl's gesture proved that their exchange wasn't just affection. It was learning, growth, refuge. So she decided to write her next note like a poem. It spoke of stars, of longing, of people who leave and people who arrive. The note stayed there until late afternoon. The neighbor across the street walked by and said, "Dona Alzira, that window of yours brings joy to the whole street." She smiled and replied, "It was my heart that opened. The window just followed." And for the first time, she truly believed it. At sunset, she made apple and cinnamon tea and put 2 cheese breads in the oven. She didn't even know why she was doing it, only that the house needed to feel alive. As the sun began to set, she wrote on a note, "Today, I understood that love doesn't end, it just changes shape." And as she taped it to the window, she felt Carlos smiling with her. In the silence of the night, lying in bed with her husband's letter beside her, Dona Alzira no longer felt like a widow. She felt whole, as if loving, even after everything, was still possible. And as if caring for Bia was a way of keeping the flame alive, the one Carlos had lit in her so many years ago. The girl wasn't a granddaughter, nor a daughter, but she was a gift that life had left at her window. As the weeks passed, the note routine became the center of Dona Alzira's days. Every sentence she wrote was a breath, a presence. But some days, the missing weighed heavier. It was as if the silence of the house chose to scream louder. On those mornings, Alzira lingered longer at the window, waiting for the small figure of Bia to turn the corner with hesitant steps. On one of those days, she wrote, "Some days, the heart drags itself, but still, it moves forward." She taped the note and stayed there, motionless, hand on the windowsill, eyes focused. When Bia passed by, she glanced briefly, took the note, and held it to her chest. Alzira felt a lump rise in her throat. They were together in a pain that wasn't easy to explain. Later that afternoon, she found a different envelope at the window. It was larger, carefully folded. Inside, a drawing. An elderly woman and a girl sitting side by side on a bench, watching the sunset. In the background, a tree with red flowers. And below, written with care, "Some days I drag myself too, but you help me keep going." That image stayed etched in Alzira's memory, like a painting hung in the soul. She pinned the drawing to the living room wall, right next to Carlos's photo. It felt as if the girl was part of the family now, a granddaughter that time had brought by surprise. An unlikely bond, but deeply true. A love built in absence and blooming in connection. The next morning, when she opened the window, she wrote in big letters, "Today, my heart woke up lighter. Thank you for walking with me, even from afar." The note danced slightly in the wind as it fluttered on the tape. Alzira went back inside, brewed coffee, and baked cassava biscuits. For the first time, she set out 2 napkins, one for her, one for someone else. On Monday morning, the window woke up empty. Alzira's note was still there, but no light footsteps appeared on the sidewalk. Bia didn't come. All day long, Dona Alzira looked through the glass, trying to hide the growing ache. 1,000 possibilities ran through her mind. Maybe she was sick, maybe away on a trip, maybe just running late. But the absence hurt like a wordless message. On the second day, doubt turned into prayer. Alzira wrote a different kind of note. "Today, I write without knowing if you'll pass by, but I write anyway, because affection should not depend on certainty." She placed the paper on the window and went back inside with a heavy heart. The tea grew cold, the radio went silent. Everything seemed on pause, waiting for Bia. By Wednesday, as she turned the corner with hope in her eyes, nothing had changed. No new note, no sign of Bia. Alzira thought about going out, asking about the girl, but she didn't know where to start. She felt helpless. The street looked the same, but something essential had vanished from it. On Thursday, she decided to write only, "I'm here." That was all she could manage. The words felt too small against the emptiness. This absence was different from all the others she had known. It wasn't like losing Carlos or the distance from her daughter. It was the suspension of a bond still being built. And that hurt in a different way. In the late afternoon, sitting in her rocking chair, Alzira looked at the window as one looks at an old photograph. She thought about everything they had shared. The words, the drawings, the silences. She thought about how it was possible to miss someone so deeply without ever having hugged them. And then she cried. Softly, ashamed of the walls, but she cried. On Friday, she placed flowers on the windowsill. No note. It was as if the flowers could speak for her. One last gesture, hoping to be seen. And then, just as she was taking the kettle off the stove, she heard footsteps. She rushed to the window. It was an unfamiliar woman, but on the ground, taped to the window frame, there was a piece of paper, a short phrase. "I'll be back soon, I promise." It was Bia's handwriting, shaky but alive. Alzira pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't know how long that soon would be, but the promise was enough. It was life. It was continuity. It was the bond holding on, even at a distance. Monday came with rain, but Dona Alzira didn't let it bring her down. Even with no new note, she turned on the lights in the living room and made tea with more care than usual. "Today, I'm going to write as if she were here," she told herself. And she wrote, "Some days, we need to become the presents we wish we could receive." She taped the note to the window and went back to watching. By mid-morning, a surprise. A colorful paper, taped with clear tape next to her usual ribbon. Alzira rushed to it. The handwriting was steadier this time. "I missed you. I had to leave for a few days, but I read all your notes, even from far away." She smiled, deeply moved. Bia had returned, and even though she hadn't been there physically, her heart had stayed close. That was what mattered. During lunch, Alzira set 2 plates on the table, as she used to when Carlos was alive. One for her, one for love. That note from Bia was a new kind of love, silent, but whole, and it was enough to fill the day. She wrote another note. Missing someone is also a way of remembering that we're still alive. Bia replied the next day with a drawing of 2 teacups and a heart between them. Alzira taped it to the kitchen wall. Now the house had new artwork, made of paper, memory, and affection. It didn't matter if it was temporary. What mattered was what it represented: shared presence. The exchange resumed with more strength. Bia started writing more, little stories from her day, random phrases like, "I got a good grade today," or "My teacher smiled at me." Alzira read each line with grandmotherly eyes, and she responded with warm words. "You matter. Never forget that." Or, "Even if the world ignores you, I see you." The most beautiful thing was realizing that even without ever touching, the two of them were learning how to care for each other. Alzira felt useful, alive. She was no longer just the lonely lady on the corner. She was a confidant. She was company. And that changed everything. Even the rainy days felt less gray. At the end of the week, Bia left an envelope with a small rosebud inside. In the note, she wrote, "So your home keeps blooming." Alzira smiled, placed the rose in a glass of water, and wrote, "It's already blooming here." She never imagined that spring could fit into something so small. On Sunday afternoon, while watering the plants, Dona Alzira heard laughter coming from the neighbor's house. Children's voices, little explosions of joy that leapt over the wall. It had been a long time since she'd noticed that sound. Curious, she approached the fence and saw Bia among other kids, running through the yard next door. It was the first time she had seen her smile so freely. Something about that scene touched her deeply. Seeing Bia outside the window, surrounded by other voices, made her seem even more real. Alzira returned inside with a soft smile. She thought about writing something different, more spontaneous. She picked a blue piece of paper and wrote, "Happiness sounds like laughter that comes from afar and enters through the window." She taped it in place and waited. By late afternoon, she heard hurried steps on the sidewalk. Bia ran past, stopped, took the note, and made a small motion with her hand, almost a wave. She didn't say anything, but to Alzira, that gesture was like a whole conversation. She felt that, even from afar, the girl wanted to include her in the joy she was living that day. In the next note, Alzira drew a butterfly and wrote, "To fly is also to land in someone's heart." She taped it up like always. By morning, there was a reply. "You write beautifully. My teacher said I can write like that too." That filled Alzira's eyes with tears. It felt like the seed was beginning to grow. Inspired, she decided to write more. She set aside sheets of paper and began sketching short stories. She used made-up characters, but the messages were real. Resilience, courage, love. Each note became a tiny tale, and Bia responded with curiosity. What happened to the girl in the yellow dress? Or, did the tree still bloom? The backyard, once just dirt and flower pots, became a place of inspiration. Alzira started walking through it in search of ideas. A blooming flower, an ant crossing the path. Everything became a reason to dream up a new story. It was as if nature spoke to her. And finally, she had someone to listen. On a clear-skied day, a surprise, the morning note was taped with double-sided tape, and next to it, a message written in round handwriting. "The teacher asked us to write about someone who inspires us. I wrote about you." Alzira read it slowly, then read it again. That wasn't just tenderness, it was recognition. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. She was so moved she couldn't write anything right away. Only that evening, with a calmer heart, did she write a special note. When someone sees us with affection, we begin to exist again with more courage. Along with the note, she taped a small golden star she had kept for years in a little box. It was her symbol of gratitude. The next day, Bea replied with a drawing of an old lady with white hair holding a cup of tea. Next to it, the words, "She is my friend." Alzira taped the drawing to the hallway wall. Her house now had a gallery of affection. Anyone who stepped in would see she no longer lived just with memories, but with real encounters, even if made of paper. The neighbor across the street, Dona Alzira, asked curiously, "Is that girl your granddaughter?" Alzira simply answered, "She's a gift." That day, she felt like going out. She walked to the corner square, bought peppermint candies, and came back smiling. Every small gesture felt big inside her. It was like she was learning how to live again. That afternoon she wrote, "Thank you for choosing me as your inspiration. You're helping me become better too." She taped the note to the window and sat in her rocking chair, watching the sky change colors. When Bea passed, she tapped the glass twice. It was the first intentional gesture. Alzira felt her heart race. The window had become a living portal. That week's rain felt endless. The sky stayed gray, and the street outside Alzira's window turned into a quiet corridor of silence. In the early days, she still left notes, even without seeing Bea pass by. But by Thursday, the ribbon she had taped that morning remained untouched by nightfall. It was as if the wind missed her too. Worried, Alzira wrote a different note. "You are missed." Next to it, she added a drawing of 2 teacups. It was an invitation, even if she didn't know if it would be accepted. When the rain paused for a few hours, she held on to the hope that Bea would return. But the days remained empty, and the dangling ribbons began to wear out. Then, on Saturday morning, Nade showed up again. As she walked in, she noticed the faded notes. Alzira didn't explain. She simply served coffee and tried to disguise the silence settling in again. "She hasn't been around," she murmured, as if speaking about a little bird that stopped visiting the porch. Nade heard it, but said nothing. At the end of the day, Alzira wrote the shortest note of all. "It's okay if you don't want to come back, but I'll still be here." She folded it gently, taped it to the window, and stood watching. For the first time, she felt afraid of an ending. But she also understood the need to respect the other's space. Because love, even when silent, is also waiting. The following Monday, Alzira went to the bakery on the corner. It had been a while since she'd gone out for that long. When she returned, she saw something unexpected on the window. A white envelope, clipped with a colorful clothespin. Her heart raced. She opened it carefully and found a handwritten letter on notebook paper. It was from Bea. Long, filled with simple, honest words. In the letter, Bea explained that she had moved to another neighborhood. Her parents had separated, and she was now living with her grandmother. But before leaving, she had asked her former neighbor to deliver that envelope to the lady with the notes. Alzira cried as she read each line. The girl had written, "You were my courage on hard days." While reading, the window seemed to breathe with her. Everything made sense. The days of absence, the silence, the emptiness. Now there was closure, not a sad one, but full of gratitude. She replied with one final message. "Take a piece of this window with you. I'll be rooting for your garden." She taped a dried flower between 2 sheets of paper. That night, Alzira sat in her armchair and closed her eyes peacefully. The exchange had ended, but not the meaning behind it. She understood now that life's encounters aren't meant to last forever, but they can be transformative. And even those who leave still leave roots inside us. The days that followed were quieter. Alzira returned to her routine slowly. She read more, did some embroidery, and cared for her plants with tenderness. The window remained open, not in expectation, but as a witness to what had been. She started writing notes for herself, short phrases she placed on the glass. "You're doing just fine. Today is a good day to bloom." People on the street began to notice. A man left a rose in a paper bag. A child scribbled "hi" on a note and taped it with colorful ribbon. Without meaning to, Dona Alzira had started a new cycle. Her window was now a shared mural, and each piece of paper taped to it seemed to stitch together the loose threads of her heart. One day, as she walked down the sidewalk, a young woman stopped and said, "I always read what you write. It helps me keep going." Alzira thanked her with a smile. Then she went inside, picked up a piece of paper and wrote, "If we touch someone, it was already worth it." She taped it up, as always. It was Dona Alzira's birthday. Nade came with cake and a gift, but the greatest gift was the one she hadn't expected. When she opened the door that morning, there was an envelope on the floor. Inside, a drawing from Bia, the two of them, and the window, all holding hands. On the back, just one sentence: "I still think of you." Alzira held the drawing to her chest. It was the most beautiful gift she could have received. A reminder that love leaves marks even time cannot erase. And that day, the window remained open, with sunlight, with wind, with memories, but above all, with gratitude.